Welcome to another episode of Wrestling Tonight, covering all things pro wrestling. As always, live from No Cell Studios, I'm the ace of the Tavern, Acefield Retro, and joined on this great Monday with the one bad Chad himself. What's going on, dude?
Not a whole lot, man. The releases came. We wondered. We waited. We saw the front office go through it, and unfortunately, some of the talent went through it this week. Can't wait to get into all of that. Our thoughts on who should go where, who's the big losses, who did you see coming, all that good stuff. But another fine week at the Tavern with you, Ace.
Absolutely, and like Michael Myers, waiting in the dark. Those cuts were inevitable. We felt it coming. We thought it was going to be behind the scenes. Everyone said, don't worry, it's just going to be duplicate positions in the higher offices. But no, the talent releases had to happen. And some of the names on here, as we'll go through eventually in the big story number one, were surprising, some not so surprising, some even more surprising they were even still employed. But some of the stuff being shared all over the place. It's interesting now, the dynamic of when these releases happen, because we all know that the cuts do happen. This is nothing new in wrestling. And when we look through, now we have the benefit in the recent years of more social media, more voices after the fact. These guys are not living in anonymity. The releases have sort of conversation paired with them, and that's kind of the stuff that happens where maybe they have reasons and some optimistic point of view about what lies ahead of them in the independents. And even those, like the most, blanketed statements from those that have been successful, Matt Cardona, Steph DeLander, those people that have made a living on the indies. I'm curious to see what some of these guys do, women do, because gone are the days where only you can make money in WWE. Like, you can make meaningful money elsewhere. And I think a lot of these guys have an opportunity, it's not just a bad thing. It could be a good thing.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel bad because there's a part of me, obviously you'd hate to see anyone lose their job, especially a high paying job in the industry like WWE. I mean, that's the top of the mountain for a lot of wrestlers. But there is always this excitement, man. Not that people have lost their job, but with these wave of releases, I do always get a sense of excitement for what's next for these guys. It's kind of like the cream will rise, I feel like sometimes these cuts kind of end a person's career and you never really see anything from it. But Matt Cardona, if you're someone like him that really loves wrestling, this kind of separates the men from the boys as far as becoming a star, because you can either curl up in a ball and kind of disappear into another career field, or you can put your working boots on and really go out and show what you have that maybe WWE didn't allow you to show. So I always get excited for the companies like Impact, NWA, MLW, GCW, AEW, who's going to pick who's going to go where, and not to kind of shit on people getting fired, but hey guys, this is an opportunity to step up and really show the big dog WWE what they're missing out on.
Yeah, and I understand that part of it. Being fired is never something you want to happen to anybody, as you mentioned before. But I look at this as really an opportunity, like you mentioned. I think this is a good opportunity for those to redefine themselves. Gone are the days where there's a benefit to just being an ex-WWE guy on an indie show. You really can redefine yourself. It doesn't have to be tied with the moniker you had in WWE. Easily Dolph Ziggler, as we're going to talk about during the big story number one. He could easily be, Nick Nemeth. It doesn't have to be Dolph Ziggler anymore. There's not as the biggest appeal of that brand name.
Right.
And I think that is lost here, where there were fights the fact that Zack Ryder had to become Matt Cardona, that was in a time where it was a big piece of who he was. And now, in my opinion, the name Matt Cardona is way more famous than the name Zack Ryder ever could have dreamed it could be.
Absolutely.
And that's he's a trailblazer. So I think he should be used as the archetype of what could happen in best case scenario if you really put your nose to the grindstone and figure it out.
That's what I was going to say. Cardona I think it's said a lot, and some could say maybe it's overstated, but I believe he kind of is the template for what you can do without even going to a major promotion. I mean, this guy, he's worked everywhere. NWA, MLW, Impact, GCW, DDT. I mean, he's doing everything. And like he said to the talent, you're going to have to work. You're going to have to work hard, but you can do it. So I'm with you. Cardona definitely holds more weight than Zack Ryder ever did, in my opinion.
With that being said, let's get into big story number one and talk about all those releases that we're discussing right now.
Big stories. Story one.
So big story number one, we have WWE releases in bulk, headlined by two big names here, and we can see them on the picture. Well, three big names, I should say. Matt Riddle, Dolph Ziggler, Mustafa Ali, and a lot of different names too. So as these kind of started to come down the pike and news was and it didn't come in all one fell swoop, Chad. There was like other names that dropped after the fact, some NXT talent, some people we haven't heard of, but before we get into the specifics, were you surprised by any of these releases? Did it leave you, when Wyndham Rotunda was released back in the day, or when those Braun Strowman, when that cut happened a couple of years ago, those left us kind of dumbfounded, like, can't believe that happened. Were you left with that feeling after these releases?
I got to be honest, man, there wasn't one release that surprised me. There really wasn't. I mean, not to say that, Dolph isn't like, damn, really? Dolph's gone? But, we love Dolph. I've always thought Dolph was a main event guy. As far as his in-ring work, his selling, I've always felt they never really locked in and pushed that guy to where he could be. I always saw Shawn Michaels in him. And this isn't just me. I mean, I think there's a large fan base out there that thinks he's one of the most underutilized guys of the past 10 years, 10, 15 years. They put the title on him at one point and then it just kind of fizzled out. If you remember that pop when he won that title, I mean, the dude, fans were behind him. But I wasn't shocked by it because he's been so underused for so long, where I feel like he's kind of just got in cruise control. Like he's content to get that steady, nice WWE paycheck, and he's kind of doing his role. He's a consummate professional, a company man. He comes and does what they ask of him and leaves. And I think he's kind of found himself in this complacency where they've held him down for so long, because reports came out that Vince wasn't a fan of him, and they've held him down that I think he's like, okay, no matter what I do, I'm never going to break through that quote unquote glass ceiling. So I'll just be comfortable and keep this paycheck. So when he got released, I was like, that makes sense. That makes sense. And even Matt Riddle, I think everybody saw that coming. Burning bridge after burning bridge after burning bridge. I think we saw that coming. Mustafa Ali, guy asked for his release, if you remember, a year and a half ago. I mean, he's been wanting out of that company for a minute, so that wasn't a shock. Emma, she had left the company before. She was in Impact doing her thing. That wasn't really shocking. Shelton Benjamin, he wasn't with the company for a while. They brought him back. I mean, they put him in the Hurt Business. We thought it was going to give him like a nice little run at the end, in the back end of his career. They really dropped the ball on that. Elias, Rick Boogs, these are all guys, Dana Brooke, all of these people are just kind of exactly what I expected a TKO release list to look like, because it's the people I hate. It makes it sound like I'm disparaging them, and I don't want it to sound like that, but it is like you're trimming the fat, for lack of a better phrase. Like, you're not getting any of your marquee guys. There wasn't a guy, like you said, there wasn't a Bray Wyatt, RIP. There wasn't a Miro. There wasn't any of these big, shocking, like, damn, dude, they were really pushing this guy and they cut him. There wasn't anything like that to me. And just to ask you, Ace, one, return the question that you just asked me. Did anybody shock you? But two, the way I'm seeing the social media reaction from this, not from the fans, but from the wrestlers who are getting cut themselves, it does seem like a different style of how they were released. Like, when releases were happening by WWE, it seemed there was a little bit more of a personal, make the call, reach out, let them know, then the news would hit. There was a few of these people that it seemed like they were finding out when we found out.
Right.
It seems like it just felt like this is a new corporate structure. Like, you're not going to be getting the person in the front office giving you a friendly call, like you might just find out it seemed like there was just a step back from the personalization that would come from the releases we went through in 2020. You know, maybe I'm putting a little too much on that. Just, you know, we're in the aftermath of TKO taking over, but it did feel just slightly more impersonal to me this time around.
Yeah, I mean, it was the first mass releases since Endeavor's acquisition of WWE, so I expect them to feel a little bit more, as you mentioned, sterile, or there's a lack of personal touch. But going back to the question about who I'm surprised by, I would say Ziggler and Riddle they left me a little bit surprised, because and the fall from grace for Riddle can be documented even on this show, talking about the conversations on the Tavern. Should he be a guy that's WWE champion? If you go back during this Roman's reign, I know it's been extensive at this point, but there was a chance where Riddle was one of those guys, like slotted
he was going to win the Rumble.
To win the Rumble, potentially beat Roman for the championship. He was very over with RK Bro. So his fall from grace isn't the most rapid, but it is pretty fast to see where he's gone in such a short period of time. And we never really got closure on that story with the JFK thing. And maybe we'll get more information over time. I'm sure that he's going to find himself in front of a camera or a microphone very soon talking about things. And, you know, maybe there's a different sports entertainment venue, maybe a GCW he wants to work with, as you mentioned. Like I could see him doing a Josh Barnett Bloodsport down the line WrestleMania weekend. He would be a big draw. But looking at Ziggler, let's circle back to him for a second, kind of eulogize his career in WWE. And that's not to say he's not to come back. I know I was listening to the Chick Foley show. They were talking about maybe down the line he signs a legacy deal. He has some of the great figures. Maybe he's a guy who gets that type of situation for him. Or maybe he tests his limits on elsewhere, like AEW would be somewhere that he's a guy. I understand the roster is bloated, but it has to be tempting to have Nick Nemeth there as a top of the card type guy, because there's history. I mean, there's history with him and Ambrose and now Moxley down the line over the IC title. And there's other guys on that roster that he's worked with. But the other thing that was awesome to see was John Cena and The Rock coming out and kind of supporting Dolph Ziggler. And Cena posted following on X on Thursday after the news broke that Ziggler was released. 1,554 matches at heel Ziggler, #respect. And then The Rock got involved and said, he reposted a Sports Kita infographic listing Ziggler's career accolades, all the stuff that he's won in his career in WWE. And Rock said, quote, "Just seeing all these releases now these days are fucking tough for the ones who gave their all to our crazy world of pro wrestling. Like Ziggler, what a decorated WWE career, and I'll always be a supporter and a fan. Can't wait to see what he and everyone does next. #onward." So that's a really high praise. I mean, Ziggler, if you look at his career, his longevity in the business, I know we're in like a vacuum now that it doesn't feel as fast. I mean, it doesn't feel as long as it's actually been, but he's been there for a while. You can consider him a legend, former WWE World Heavyweight Champion. He's Money in the Bank. He's also IC champion. He's a sole survivor, one of the biggest angles with the Authority back in 2014. This guy was very, very, I mean, he's a legend. He really is. So to see him gone, and like you said, he hasn't been used recently. So it's not like, oh, he was involved in this big angle. They were getting ready to launch him back up. He's been on ice for a very long time. But it's interesting to see, like, no loyalty left. Like, I feel like he's maybe the legacy act and the merchandise deal will come down the line, but it felt like he was a guy that WWE want to keep in-house to at least, you know, have him for future things, show up in the future. Cause I think he still has a big fan base in WWE.
Yeah, he does. But I mean, unless you're a top 10 guy there,
True.
There's no loyalty. Like they will shit can you like that, especially now, man. Like it's not up to them. Like if Ari Emanuel says, "Hey, we got X amount of dollars we need to free up,"
right,
people's going to get cut. And with Dolph, I feel like that probably played into this. Not so much the lack of loyalty, but the guy, for as long as he was with the company, you got to think he's making a pretty penny.
I would,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he probably had a pretty nice deal. And when they're going down the roster and looking at the price tag for each talent versus how they're being used and their exposure week to week, he was probably at the top of the list of like, man, we're paying this guy a lot of money and he's not in a top angle. That makes you kind of able to be cut,
That was Braun
unfortunately.
Strowman's downfall when he got that huge contract, and then they saw in 2020 when
Yeah.
obviously they're not doing live events.
Same
Boom, he was
thing with the
gone.
Good Brothers, you know,
Right.
Carl Anderson, they got that monster deal. And then immediately after that, they get cut because it's like, we're not using these guys. I'll say this about Dolph, though. I hope wherever he goes, the people that get him see him the way his hardcore fans see him. I don't want to see him go and middle of the pack, kind of, you know, when you have Cena, when you have The Rock, it's always been, you've always heard legends and guys in the business put him over. You hear Bully Ray put him over to the moon on Busted Open Radio. And this isn't putting him over to the moon now that he's gone and everyone's looking back and giving him his flowers after the fact. He was consistently being brought up by legends of like, man, this guy's got it.
Right.
Like if you see the way he works, he is one of the guys. So it's always kind of been there. So I want Scott D'Amore, Billy Corgan, Court Bauer, Tony Khan, whoever it is that brings him a check that entices him to sign with their promotion, just have him in mind of being a top guy. That's what fans have always wanted. I don't care where he lands. I think he's a great addition to anyone. But could you imagine Dolph Ziggler, Nick Namath coming out on, I mean, I'm not saying this is the promotion he should sign for, but imagine him coming out and cutting a promo, a shocking debut, and cutting a promo on Kenny Omega, cutting a promo on Josh Alexander, cutting a promo on Jacob Fatu, you know,
Right.
throwing him in with instantly into that top thing where we're into the top tier of the card where you're like instantly seeing him in a different light. Okay, this guy's not an Intercontinental Champion anymore. This guy is a top tier guy. I want to see that. I just want, out of anyone who was released, he's the one guy that I'm hoping with his amount of time in the business that we get to see him viewed as a big, big star. Because like you said, he's had this decorated career in WWE, longevity, but he never really had that long-term, really sink your teeth in feud storyline at the top of the card for an extended period. It was just kind of like he would get pushed up for a second, then he'd get brought back down. I mean, there was a time, it was kind of a running meme. How many times did we have Dolph Ziggler walk out on Raw and cut a promo about, people don't respect me around here. I work my ass off and no one, you know, like it became kind of a running gimmick and nothing ever came from it. They teased so many times that, okay, we're going to actually treat this guy like a top guy, and then they'd pull back from it. So I just hope the company that gets him, man, treats him like a top guy and really pushes him where we can go person to person on this as we go through the individual cuts, Ace. But if you had your pick of the litter, dream scenario, booked the right way, where would you want to see Ziggler?
New Japan Pro Wrestling. I think that they need star power. I think it could be a great way for him to utilize these untapped match potential, because I think he's one of the best workers of our generation. Modern day Mr. Perfect, the way he bumps and he's seamless in there. I would like to see him work that strong style and help New Japan Pro Wrestling that is in such a need for bigger stars, and re-raise that stock and maybe come back to WWE or Impact or AEW with a new, coat of paint on top of that star. That, like, sometimes a run through Japan can really be a thing that brings some eyes back to you in a good way.
Yeah, they need it. They a Dolph Ziggler mixing it up with like Sonata and Okada. I mean, sign me up.
So before we get to Matt Riddle and put our cap here on this release stuff, let's go through the names again. You mentioned some of them in bulk, but let's just going to read them through. As we mentioned, Ziggler and Riddle, Mustafa Ali, Emma, Riddick Moss, Aaliyah, Shelton Benjamin, Elias, Rick Boogs, who was on a YouTube video talking about his release. This is what I was talking about. I was fascinated in getting their perspective in real time. at the start of this YouTube video, he shared his belief that a backstage political power play was the reason for his release. Interested to see that kind of come to fruition, see what happens with that. Because before Rick Boogs got injured and him teaming with Shinsuke Nakamura, one of the most overacts in all of wrestling, great look. I feel like he had something there, some magic that got disappeared after, he got hurt. And that's your worst enemy. We talked about that with Mr. Kennedy back in the day.
Yeah.
Injury could be something that extinguishes the fire, but we'll see what happens down the line. But you mentioned Dana Brooke, Mace, Mansoor, Top Dollar. So we only have 2/4 of the hit row left here. Shanky, Quincy Elliott, and then we're going to get to some of the names that are maybe not as familiar. Dabba-Kato, the big guy from Raw Underground, and then Alyssa Leon, Bryson Montana, Daniel MacArthur, Brooklyn Barrow, Kevin Ventura Cortez, Alexis Gray, and just recently the most NXT talent that happened here just hours ago was Melanie Brzezinski. So what could have been, I'm sure some of these names at the bottom in the future will be like, oh, remember they were signed for a cup of coffee with WWE and now they're this person. So
Right.
But those are the names, and we may not be done. You know what I'm saying? Like, we may not be done because they're coming in waves. It's not just this big like memo. All these guys are released. As you said, it's happening in real time. And as things happen, they're in a boardroom and they're like, we're not using this person. Let's get rid of them. So I think no one's safe.
Yeah, I'm with you. I wouldn't be shocked if there was waves throughout. Because if you look at the way TKO kind of does business through UFC, that model, they're not like WWE where you see these massive layoffs in chunks. They just kind of randomly pop out throughout the year. Like, oh, here's a couple guys gone. It's not, we've kind of got indoctrinated with WWE. Like they all come in this big wave, which this is what we're seeing now. But UFC's not like that. So I don't know if the philosophy of Dana White and those guys is going to kind of be bled over into Vince and Triple H and how they handle who they cut, when they cut. But if they do kind of mirror that, I wouldn't be shocked if more releases kind of sprinkle throughout the year.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this is a kind of a hit to what we're seeing as progress towards unionization. I think this is a reestablishment of the overhead corporation side of things, where reestablishing that these are contracted employees, that they're appointment based, that at any time.
These guys are independent contractors.
Exactly.
They're not employees.
So I feel like we were moving towards this, and this is Endeavor's flex right here, or I should say TKO's flex of saying like, all right, at any time, no one's safe. There's no guarantee. This is not something that you're going to be able to rest on your scruples and hang out in the back and catering. Like, everyone's got to prove their worth here. And it's about maximizing profit, especially as we, big story number 3, we'll talk about the future of the television rights, which plays a huge part of this. This is going to be a reestablishing of the power that is. And I think the combination of UFC and WWE is a superpower in a lot of good ways, but for some of the talent, it's not a good thing, because the merging of sort of this power is reestablishing that there's no wrestler bigger than them. And that's always been the case, but it's never more evident than now that anybody can be released in at any time. This isn't like, as you mentioned, an overarching, all right, this is the window where people are going to be released and then everybody's safe. I think at any time you can just see people get cut, and that has to be scary, unsteady ground.
Well, I mean, what's the phrase we always hear about the WWE locker room? Walking on eggshells.
Right.
I feel like you hear that a lot. That ain't going away. Like now, at least it was kind of a mom and pop operation with Vince. You had to fear Vince, but that's when there might be directives handed down to Vince that he has to do now. Like there's another power structure. Now, I will say, like, Ari and TKO with UFC have shown over the course of their partnership that for the most part in the day-to-day operations, Ari seems to take a very standoff approach. Let the guys who run the show, and we're not going to get involved. The only time they really get involved is when it's like truly affecting the bottom line and they have some sort of like business synergy with something that's going to cause a reaction. But I don't think we have to worry too much about TKO once they get the machine the way they want it to. We're still in this like, okay, let's figure out how this is going to work stage. But Dana White in UFC, he's pretty much running the game. Like Ari's the money man. If anything goes wrong, maybe he would step in. But to this point, he pretty much is business as usual with UFC. It doesn't feel like there's another entity controlling it. Just from a fan perspective,
Right.
there wasn't this massive change. Like, oh, this isn't the company I grew up loving. It's more exposure. It's a little oversaturated. So I think that could be something to track as a fan of like oversaturation, because when Ari took over UFC, it used to feel a little more special. UFC, like events used to feel rare and but in a good way, where you were hungry for them. Now it's like there's an event every weekend. It's a lot of oversaturation. So I'm more concerned about oversaturation than they're changing what we love, you know?
Yeah, and the wheel will continue to spin here. No one's bigger than the machine. But let's talk about Matt Riddle here. He's no longer employed by WWE, and this was announced through social media. He made a post on Friday night informing fans of the news, and he said, "Just wanted to inform everyone that I'm no longer with WWE." He continued, "Thank you for the memories and opportunities. Also, thank you to all the fans for the support and love you give me every time I go out to the ring. See you all soon." So this was a big name that came through, and tied with this, you can't help but think, and maybe it's not, maybe it's just lack of being used, but maybe it has something to do with Riddle accusing Port Authority police of sexually assaulting him during an incident at JFK Airport a couple weeks ago. Riddle deleted the post. Then we had law enforcement sources telling the New York Post that Riddle was drunk and causing a disturbance at the airport during that. And the New York Post continued to cover it, saying that Riddle left on his own and wasn't detained or arrested, and he didn't file a police report regarding the assault allegation. And obviously there's the failed drug test too back in December 2022 that you can kind of look at as, if you're a big corporation, you don't want to be involved in this. This is 2 checks in the wrong box. And
the sexual assault allegations that came
Yes.
out in the Me Too movement. So there's,
that's all. Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So there was a lot. I feel like this is just dude, every time we turn around, there's something with this guy.
Absolutely. And I mean, we know his former UFC history as well. He was asked to leave as well. And we spoke about that at length here. We don't have to go into it again, but well decorated, not as decorated as Dolph Ziggler, but former tag team champion. I mean, he was the US champion not so long ago, teaming with RK Bro and Randy Orton, one of the hottest acts in all wrestling, selling merch by the dozens. And he just started this program teaming with Drew McIntyre. We're never going to see that come to fruition. Not that it had any steam to it. It seemed a little goofy for Drew. But right now we're waiting for the 90-day non-compete clause. I mean, he's going to be eligible to sign with anyone as of Thursday, December 21st. So we could be looking at, like we said, I think GCW would be an awesome spot. And I'm not sure if he'd want to do that, but the blood sport concept really fits him. You could see a lot of these independents maybe have the King of Bros come back because he is a draw. Like, I think he's one of those guys that he's gonna be able to have his own name, because it is his name, and have the ability to bring it with him and have the ability to kind of build that star elsewhere. And I think there's momentum for that. We'll see if he can capitalize on it.
Yeah, I'm going to be very interested with this, because he's one of those talents that is similar to, if you're a football fan, he's similar to a Terrell Owens. Terrell Owens in the beginning was, kind of a problem child, would talk trash on his quarterbacks, left the Niners. The Eagles took a shot on him, thought they could change him, just talk trash on his quarterback. Dallas Cowboys took a shot on him, locker room issues. And then it finally got to a point where he would bounce team to team, and not a lot of teams really would give him a shot anymore. So I'm wondering if he's going to be one of those guys where some of these bigger promotions, like, Scott D'Amore with Impact, Tony in AEW, are they going to look at this guy and be like, I don't want to sign him right now. I want to see if he can keep his, keep on the straight and narrow. I'm really wondering if a big promotion would sign him. I'm honestly wondering if he's used to that big WWE money. If the money's not there from a major promotion and he has to sign, work the indies, is he wanting to go back on that indie schedule? Does he take a fight in mixed martial arts again? There's bare knuckle boxing out there, man. That bare knuckle federation, what BFC, I think, bare knuckle championships, bare knuckle fighting championships, they're offering crazy money. I think the Saudis are putting a little money in that, like crazy contracts. Does he take some freak show fight there for the cash? Like, this could go a number of ways for Riddle. I don't think it's just a he's going to AEW situation.
Oh, no.
I think like this could be bad. This is the one that has the most downfall to it for me. Like, we could see the downfall of a guy just if you look at his track record of what's happening. And I got to be honest, like, with everything that's happened to him, you know, the JFK airport situation, the Me Too movement call out, the failed drug tests, like all of those things, you know, they stack up and they whatever. But we've seen Jeff Hardy, we've seen people have issues.
I mean, Randy Orton was an example.
Randy Orton and WWE stands by them. So we've seen that before. So that wasn't the red flag. The red flag for me was the TKO thing, because when that came in, and I'm not saying Dana White has any type of influence on what happens in WWE, but he burnt a bridge in UFC. And I got to take up for Riddle. It was over some bullshit. I mean, the guy smoked pot, you know, and Dana cut him. And he was on like a 5-fight winning streak in the UFC, I believe, at the time he got cut. So he was a legit fighter. But he came out publicly and would trash talk Dana White. And Dana White and him really did not like each other in the fallout of that release. And when TKO came in, there was a lot of like scuttlebutt in the mixed martial arts community that was saying like, Matt Riddle's days are numbered in WWE. Dana's over there, and what happens? So Dana's a powerful man. He could have whispered in Vince's ear. Like,
100%. You know? Over drinks. You tell me that's not happening. Like, you're like, it's kind of a disrespect you have him on your roster, and like, to make right. Like, he's already a headache for you in other ways. You might as well just like alleviate the issue.
Yeah. So I think there's a little more beyond just his run-ins with the law lately. I think they're seeing the big picture with this guy. And I got to be honest, I don't know where he goes. I truly do not know. I don't think AEW will jump on him. I don't think Impact will jump on him. I think, like you said, with the Josh Barnett Bloodsport or maybe GCW, but I'm just wondering, is he ready to get back into that mindset of an independent wrestler and putting the road work in? He's been living with satin sheets, man, in WWE. Is he willing to go back to the grind, or is he just wanting those quick money payouts? It's going to be very interesting to watch.
Yeah, and some of the other names we saw pop up, I know that Brett Lauderdale had said he wants Shanky for the Joey Janela Spring Break show, which would be amazing. I think Shanky has a lot of charisma we saw from him. He wasn't utilized at doing the dancing gimmick. He has good size, and that is always important on the independents. So, I mean, I would love to see it. Him reinvent himself. What an underdog story to have that happen. But
that'd be great.
Also, I mean, Mustafa Ali, do you see impact for him, AEW? Because I know that he feels like a guy who could show up in AEW, get a reaction, and then all of a sudden being in a 6-man tag somewhere on a Rampage like overnight. So if I'm him, I'm careful about where I choose to go. And I think Impact is probably a better fit than AEW with all of the exhaustive amount of options of who to be at the top of the card in AEW. I think Impact, he would at least be involved in a meaningful story and be featured on TV weekly.
I think he would make more of an, for lack of a better word, impact in Impact.
Right.
But I just have this AEW feeling with the guy, and I'm not gonna refute anything that you just said. I think he could come in, get a nice little pop, and then he's doing 6-mans on Rampage. Not that that's a bad thing. They've actually improved Rampage lately, but there's a reason why this guy was wanting his release a year and a half, 2 years ago. I feel like he has his eye. That's when AEW was kind of real hot. I think his style, his size, he is AEW through and through, as far as if you look at just the way he works and his body type matched up with some of those guys. I would like to see him in Impact, but if anyone on this list goes to AEW, I think it's probably him.
Oh yeah, and the thing with him too is kind of a sad happenstance story with injury where the Kofi Mania thing was branched off of that. Like we could have been talking a different story where he's a former world champion himself. And I'm not sure if he was going to beat Daniel Bryan / Bryan Danielson at WrestleMania that year in that program, but he was a guy that they looked at, especially with the international dates they were doing. They wanted to make sure they were featuring Mustafa Ali, and I think he had a lot of momentum behind him. And even when he initially asked for his release, I think it was during the time that FTR was like still in the company, and they were still both looking for their releases. FTR got loose, and then he couldn't get loose. And I think there's a lot of buzz off him right now. So I'd be interested to see how he creates more of a momentum based thing for himself.
He's
but
a
like
sneaky good promo too, man.
Absolutely. I think he's a main eventer in the waiting, and
there's a
AEW is tough though. It's a tough thing because
it's tough.
You could be easily. I mean, look at Miro. Miro's a top guy, and hasn't done anything. And even like a guy like Malachi with House of Black, like it's always not featured. He'd have to be thrust into a main story,
and I don't see
on
that
the jump, and I don't see that happening. And like I would say, likely what his situation would be like in AEW, like Johnny Nitro, John Morrison showing up, and now he's just featured as a guy who's involved in matches. He gets a reaction, and
dude, honestly, look at it from AEW's perspective right now, where they're trying to garner positive locker room vibes. I'm not saying Ali is going to be an issue in the locker room, but if I'm AEW looking at talent being released, Ali was obviously disgruntled. He's wanted out of this company. He's came out and said things in the past interviews about not being happy there. Bringing a guy in like that with the roster you have is very risky, because you've got a guy who didn't like that he was being underused there. So if you bring him in and he falls right back into that path, you're bringing in someone who's going to be disgruntled in your locker room. Unless you have a plan to truly give him something to bite into, don't bring him.
Or toss him into Dark Order, similar. He was the leader of Retribution. I mean, you could have him involved with Dark Order. He has to be thrust into something that's already in motion. It can't be just a cold open. He's going to have that first match with whoever on pay-per-view. Like it has to be into a storyline that's already existing. I don't see it happening right now.
One thing to look at that's a dark horse with Mustafa Ali, keep your eye on, is a short little run in GCW. He's very, very good friends with Gringo Loco, both Chicago guys. When we spoke to Gringo Loco on Visits to the Tavern, go in the archives and check it out. He mentioned training to this day with Ali. So that's something to kind of track. I wouldn't be shocked if we saw him rip it up with Blake Christian at the top of the card in a GCW event. Like, I wouldn't be shocked by that at all.
That would be amazing to see. And we know that they try to highlight WrestleMania weekend. So they could have a jam-packed WrestleMania
spring break, headline spring break.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we'll definitely talk more about this over time. Hopefully no more releases as of right now. And once we
move on, Ace, if you're getting ready to move on, I want to play a quick game with you.
Sure.
It's just going to be word association. I'm going to run down this list of a few of them, not the bottom tier, but a few of them. And I want you to just, the first promotion that comes into your mind or where you want to see him.
Okay.
Spit it out. Okay. Ziggler.
New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Riddle.
Bellator.
Ali.
AEW.
Emma.
Impact.
Riddick Moss.
Indies.
Aaliyah.
AEW.
Shelton Benjamin.
Indies.
Elias.
Impact.
Rick Boogs.
Impact.
Dude, you nailed it, because Rick Boogs and Elias is so tailor-made for Impact.
Oh my God, yes. You could recreate what they were doing and then let them be even more creative with the cinematic stuff. It'd be amazing.
I did see a fan on X float the idea, and I didn't hate it. New member of Blackpool Combat Club, Shelton Benjamin.
Oh, that'd be cool.
I didn't hate that. I didn't hate it. He fits the mold, man. He's a shooter. You know, he's a real.
We also know Tony has an affinity for history, and Shelton Benjamin has accomplished a lot in wrestling. We see guys that are kind of giving good graces that probably have really no business being featured in big programs. And I love the Hardy Boys, but they're given a lot of rope to continue on TV when maybe someone without the name wouldn't be on TV. I'm not trying to be mean about it, but like Shelton Benjamin has a little bit more in the tank than those guys. And I think he could be featured like RVD we saw last night in Collision. It could be something like that.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's fun.
But
Let's think about.
Let's get into big story number 2 and preview the upcoming event this weekend, believe it or not.
Big Story 2.
So we have AEW WRESTLEDREAM happening next weekend on October 1st, and they're slated to hold this inaugural event on Sunday in Seattle, Washington. But before we get into the card, we have ticket sales looking pretty flat. We know the show is a tribute to the late, great Antonio Inoki. There won't be any New Japan Pro Wrestling stars on the show, but this is going to be for the dreamer in wrestling, as Tony Khan wants to pay tribute to. So in the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Meltzer was talking about the show, saying that has 5,005 tickets sold right now as of time of recording, and quote, it looks to be the lowest pay-per-view audience since the pandemic. So the show right now is set up for about 7,600 people. And the last time they were at the venue was a January 23rd episode of Dynamite, where it was one of their first shows, if not their first show in the Pacific Northwest. They did that run through there. So the product was a little hotter for sure. But Chad, if you look back at these shows that Daly's placed during the time of the pandemic, they had fewer people in attendance because of the guidelines in place. But if you look at some of the pay-per-views, I think, the summer 2021, not held at Daly's place. We had All Out with 10,126, Revolution with 8,359 in 2022. And then Double or Nothing was 9,000. So they ran, a smaller section. Much to do about nothing, in my opinion, because we talked about it last week. I think the live event gate stuff is down, not just because of AEW, but because of external circumstances in the real world. And especially when you run a market again.
That's a new show.
Yeah, and we saw a push for Grand Slam. They were doing very poorly as far as advanced ticket sales, and then they wound up doing a decent number. I think that could be the same thing here. I think we could be looking at close to 8,000 people in the building for Seattle. But yeah, I think it's more about just pushing through, because as you saturate the market with more events, you're going to have an interesting sort of dynamic of maybe people aren't going to buy it. Maybe the card is too skim for themselves, or maybe it's one of those things where there's only going to be a certain amount of people aside from the diehards that are going to buy select fews, and your big fours are going to continue to get the buy rate. They have to convince people over time that this is an event they should invest in.
Yeah, it's a new event. I think initially we didn't know what it was going to be. When it was first announced, it was kind of murky. Is this another Forbidden Door? Is this a joint show with New Japan? What is this show? Now, I love that it's not another Forbidden Door. I think this is a AEW storyline based thing. I think the matches, dude, when we run down this card, it's an impressive card, like shockingly good. I'm pumped for this event. And to be quite honest, I know everyone likes to kind of tear apart ticket sales, and it's fun for haters to latch onto that, and it's worrisome for diehard fans of AEW. They worry about it. I take the other approach. Like, if they're only set up for 7,500 right now, and they've got 5,000 tickets sold, I mean, dude, they're low attendance Dynamites. There's not even that it's low attendance, but the smaller venues they play, they're hot, man. Sometimes the smaller crowds for AEW are hotter than the bigger crowds. Like, you got to think, when they came back from the pandemic and they filled Daly's place, that place only holds 5,000, and that place was rocking, man. I don't mind their smaller crowds. Of course, 70,000 people going buck wild is a great thing, but that's very rare in wrestling. We get it maybe once or twice a year if we're lucky. I've always enjoyed wrestling in the 5,000 to 10,000 capacity. I think it's more intimate. You're on the action more. The crowd feels more connected. Maybe this is just me trying to make excuses for him, but I'm pumped for WrestleDream, dude. I think the crowd's going to show out. Collision peek behind the curtain. We're recording Sunday morning. Collision just happened last night. A lot of matches were announced. I think in this lead up to Sunday, we're going to see more tickets sold because, dude, hell of a card.
Yeah.
And fun and different, like different matchups. I know people are kind of poo-pooing some of the people that are in these matches, but I'm a fan of some of these matchups. Like I'm looking at the Righteous, you know, I like that they're in there, man. I like that guys like that get a spot to shine. I'm a fan, and I think it's good storytelling, and I think people are going to come out. I think we're going to see this get close to 8,000 people. I'm fine with that. That's cool.
Yeah, and also going back in history, and obviously we're doing Shot Nostalgia Season 5 for Saturday Night's Main Event, and we're covering ticket sales as the market becomes saturated when they run a market over and over again. And we see, highlights of when they were talking about that Frank Tunney tag tournament. That was a one-off that they're trying to duplicate the gym, the Crockett Cup on their own. But they did 18,000 one night, and then they ran the same event and did 2,500. And I understand it's 1987, it's different, but when you start running a market and you start putting more shows out there, you're doing live events, you're expanding your pay-per-view offerings, attendance will take a hit because you're spreading yourself a little bit more thin. And I think it's right now, AEW is not as hot as it was. There's no denying that. But right now,
they're trying to get back.
And I think there's a comfort in the stability of, even in their down years, even when things are not stable in the locker room, you have all this bad press because of the Punk stuff and other things going on, they're able to still draw in 7,000, 6,000 people in these arenas, and they're not overshooting with it doesn't look bad on TV. Any of these Dynamites that, the one that Hawk went to in Indiana, there wasn't a lot of people there.
But they were rowdy and loud.
And it looks good on TV. It's not like it looks like the Impact Zone from back in the day.
Right.
So they do a good job of shooting, and that's the production side of stuff and that they're able to fine tune. But
I got to real quick. How do you think? I think fans, there's a stigma coming out of the Punk brawl out, all this, the locker room drama, all this. I feel like that stink is being perpetuated online. And I think the stigma is overblown, because as someone who was at the very first AEW show, Double or Nothing 2019, and I've watched every minute of every show they've ever done, and we've talked about it on the flagship every Thursday morning and critiqued every little thing they've done, and we've been hypercritical of the downtimes.
Right.
I think fans are missing out right now, because I think the product is back. I think it's shockingly, you can see a shocking difference in the storytelling. I think all these hires they've made, all the stories they're telling across their 3 shows now, Rampage, things happen there. Collision, big things happen there. They are telling stories. I can see Tony taking advice from guys. He's not booking the way he was a year and a half ago. Like, it's getting spread out a lot. The love is being shown to a lot of these guys. And I think the fans that are still kind of hanging on that, oh man, they're not where they used to be. I'm telling you, they're doing things. You need to open your eyes and give it a shot, because I think they're on their way to another golden era of AEW. We always talk about 2021 when all that talent came in. If you go back and really look at that year, the Kenny Omega belt collector shit was phenomenal. It was one of my favorite storylines. But as far as the rest of the card and the really in-depth stories, I would argue that right now there is more consistent storytelling from the top of the card to the bottom of the card than there ever has been in this company's history. I think they are latching onto story. If you're watching the product, I see it. So I just, do you see that? Or do you think the stigma I know publicly and with money and tickets and stuff like that, they are in a downturn, but I feel like that's a reflection of this kind of perpetuated idea that they're still in this turmoil. I don't think they're in the turmoil. I think they're putting on great weekly TV.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the product has gotten exponentially better in the last few weeks. Since All In, All Out, the product has been consistently good. I think bringing people back is the other issue because you're going to
Yeah.
have the Punk diehards that feel a certain type of way about him not being here. Some people were here as casuals. There's no denying his impact on the viewership, but there's also you want to make sure that because I think consistency brings people back, and I think if they're hearing good things, they're seeing clips pop up online, and they're drawn back in by these stories. And how could you not be if you're a wrestling fan with this? Adam Cole, MJF, Roderick Strong stuff. It's wrestling 101, and then on top of that, the depth of it will keep you there. The Darby Allin and Christian stuff, the Hangman and Swerve stuff, Danielson Sabre Jr., which is being told not even with the two guys connecting, but that's paired with the Ricky Starks thing. There's a lot of really
Don
good
Callis storyline with
really
Jericho and Sammy, even down to the low card stuff that's getting really compelling. CJ Perry and Miro, that's interesting. Even, we called this, we hoped for this, and they pulled the trigger on it, and hats off to Tony. We got Santana and Ortiz about the feud. Are you kidding me? Like, this is like low card stuff that we're getting. It's like, dude, they are operating, they're giving a story, and you're not getting a 15-minute segment with Santana and Ortiz, but they're telling that story. And me as a fan, that excites me because it shows me that they're paying attention to the storytelling, even for the guys that get maybe 5 minutes a week. And that's exciting as a fan who remembers the Attitude Era when WWE and WCW at least tried to put little stories here. I don't know. I'm excited for it. I know the negativity's out there, but I try to guys really look at it because they're doing fun stuff from the top to the bottom, in my opinion. Just as much as WWE. What's 100%. WWE doing? Where's their Santana Ortiz, that bottom of the card? I don't understand the stigma of WWE's telling all these greater stories. Where are all of those greater stories on a WWE card compared to AEW? It's the same. If not, AEW is telling more stories right now.
Yeah, I just think there's a delay. And I think people over time, with the consistency of the product, it's been happening for weeks and weeks now. But for the casual people that are not watching, it's going to take time for the mass consensus.
100%.
It's going to take time for people to, the group think on social media that, oh, it's cool to like AEW again, so I'm going to listen to everybody else and think it's cool again. And that's the problem with social media and X or Instagram, that everything's so reactionary. And, I don't want to go on a rant about it, but just the people that wear a badge of honor for WWE selling out arenas or making more money than other wrestling companies, what does that benefit you?
Go to our comment section on anything we
It's
post.
unreal. Like, why is that? But why do you feel some sense of accomplishment because WWE is this big,
it's so strange,
monolith corporation? Like,
it's like cheering for Walmart, dude.
It's insane to me. And it's just like, you get nothing out of this. I don't understand why it's something that the tribalistic fans on either side consistently bring up stuff that they have no effect. Like, why don't you just enjoy the product? I don't give a shit about casual fans and how many people are watching. I like the wrestling that's on my screen right now.
Yeah, dude, we had Brody King come out and call out Chris Statlander for Julia Hart. Sign me up.
Right. That stuff like that is for wrestling fans. These people that are like, well, more casual fans. Why? Who cares about the casual fan? For me, I understand that the bigger, if you're sitting in a boardroom and you're trying to get Warner Brothers Discovery to be like, that is absolutely, if you have some financial incentive to work with the company. But those that are saying, well, they did better, NXT is approaching where Dynamite is. Cool. Like, I am one person and I prefer what I prefer. And why don't you just prefer what you prefer instead of just resting on, I like this show because it does better on TV and the mass public likes it better than the other show. It's so stupid.
I just don't understand cheering for a corporation or a company.
Cheering for Walmart's the best thing ever.
Over a wrestler. It's like, I'm looking at Walmart and say the workers are on strike. I want the workers to get a good rate and make some money. I'm not cheering for Walmart. Like, dude, you want there to be successful companies.
Let's go Walmart.
That's what it is. When these guys get in the comment section and talk about, this company's in the mud and WWE did this, I'm like, why do you care? I just care about the wrestlers putting on good stories and everyone getting money and entertaining me. I don't care what the stock numbers are. Like, fans are, man, the Fed brain is strong, dude.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sickness, but let's go through the card quick, go through some of these matches. The one critique I have on this card, and I had it for the last event that they had, is the world title not being defended. I understand Grand Slam.
But they're stretching. They're
Understand.
stretching the story, dude. I don't have a problem with I'm with you. We typically want that world title, but I like that they're stretching this out.
And they might have to stretch it out further. Adam Cole might actually be seriously hurt. Now,
Exactly.
Who knows if he's going to be able to compete on Sunday? Maybe they pivot and actually have MJF defend the world title somewhere in a one-off, because why would you risk Adam Cole wrestling with that ankle? That was pretty torn up on Grand Slam, and we have no updates. I know he went to the hospital that day, and maybe it's a twisted ankle, maybe it's swollen, and we have, how many days is that? 13 days since the last, since from that Wednesday where he twisted it until then.
Fingers crossed it's not that bad. I feel like if he would have done serious damage to it, we would have already heard about it.
It was scary, dude. He couldn't put weight on it.
I know.
Live in the audience.
Dude, I had a flashback to Punk stage diving into the crowd. Like it was
scary. But let's get to our matches here. We have Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, and Kota Ibushi teaming up against Takeshita, Sammy Guevara, and we got the announcement last night that's going to be Will Ospreay. So in an unexpected union, it appears that Kenny Omega and Chris Jericho at Grand Slam Rampage coming together, and they're going to be challenging the Don Callis family. And we know the history here. We don't have to go into it. And, we have Callis breaking out the screwdriver, going to hit Jericho, which enraged Omega because he was a victim of the same screwdriver. They ran off the heels. And then we got a backstage segment tying it all together. Jericho suggested that Omega and Kota Ibushi unite, which would be Callis's worst nightmare. They said it's going to be a mystery partner on their end. They wasted no time. And why would they? Because you want to get pay-per-view buys. That Takeshita, Sammy Guevara, and Will Ospreay are going to team up. This match has potential to be an absolute banger. And before I pass it to you, I just want to say, people that rip on these six-man tags, that's what AEW was built on. The first ever main event of the first ever All In was a six-man tag match that, left people in awe. So these matches hold a lot of weight, and Kota was involved in both of them.
Yeah, this is a long story too. I get you want. I'm a fan of one-on-one big singles matches. And sometimes it does feel like we get six-man fatigue. I get those critiques. But when you look at something like this isn't a blow-off to a feud. This is a step in a story. Chris Jericho was on Busted Open Radio last week, and he talked about this story is going to be a long one. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of people that are going to get involved. And he said, we're telling a long story here. So when I see a big six-man match with all of these people involved, I don't have a problem with it, because we're making our way to those singles matches within this storyline. This has been going on for a minute. I think Callis is absolute gold. And anytime he's involved in good long-term booking, especially when Omega and Jericho's kind of there, two of his closest friends, they're going to come up with something fun to watch just from a story perspective. So I'm kind of critical of six-man sometimes when it seems thrown together, or they just wanted to get a bunch of people on the card. But this isn't one of those cases, because if you're watching week to week, there's a ton of story here. This is a big match for this storyline. I'm hyped on it.
We also have the TBS Championship on the line. Chris Statlander defending against Julia Hart. Julia's on a 26-match win streak. Saw her get another win on Collision against Kiera Hogan.
She's looking good, man. She looks very
she's
improved.
Had some weight behind her.
Yeah.
And obviously Brody King wearing that cast on his arm, so maybe that's why House of Black is being put on ice right now. But Julia carrying that torch right now.
Yeah, I'm excited because Julia Hart has what I love Toni Storm is tapping into. She has a character. She's unique. She stands out from the pack. And I love that Brody came out, called out Stat. I think Stat's she's putting together a nice little run. I think she's finding her groove too, man. That match with the farewell match with Jade Cargill, I felt like was Jade's best match she had in AEW. Unfortunately, it was on her exit, but I'm pumped for this match. I like Statlander matches, and I think they're slowly, if you're really watching, they're slowly trying to get some heat with this women's division. I think it takes time. You can't improve it overnight, but I think the matches are improving. I think a little bit of the story is improving. We had Sky Blue take the Black Mist from Julia Hart. Where does that go in the fallout of this match? So I think they're putting a lot of pieces together that makes this match intriguing.
So we also have Shibata taking on Eddie Kingston for the ROH World Title and the New Japan Pro Wrestling Strong Openweight Championship.
Is
And
is the Pure Championship on the line?
I don't believe so. Originally, the card was announced that Shibata had a graphic saying he would be defending the Pure Championship, but does not believe it's not being contested under Pure rules.
Please,
so
God,
I think
give Eddie 3 titles.
that'd be amazing.
God. 3 title Eddie.
So no Pure title as of right now, and that could change down the line. But I don't think, Eddie Kingston in a Pure Championship match would be interesting, but ROH World Championship, Strong Openweight Championship against Shibata would be a huge win for Eddie going into this to add to his resume of being the guy that they're building ROH around.
I mean, Eddie Kingston's having himself a day.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy, we fans have wanted him to be in this spot. And look, I know it's not the AEW World Title, but you're sitting there holding a New Japan title. And we know how Eddie feels about Japanese wrestling. He's got a Japanese New Japan Strong Openweight title on one shoulder. And then he has the Ring of Honor, which he has history dating back in that company. He's got the world title of ROH over the other. I think that's awesome. I love this match. I'm a fan of Shibata. This is another little story thing that I have been popping for huge is the Google Translate that Shibata does on his phone. It's such a cool little character thing that when he cuts a promo, it's just a simple Google Translate from his iPhone. I love that. This is going to be a fun match. Hard hitting.
Absolutely. And we get Christian versus Darby Allin in a 2 out of 3 falls match for the TNT Championship. So if you missed Collision last night, even though Christian's been carrying around that TNT title, he's officially the champion. He defeated Luchasaurus and Darby Allin in a 3-way match in the open of Saturday's Collision to win the title for his first time. There was some dissension between Cage and Luchasaurus throughout this. And, Luchasaurus wound up being the guy who got pinned. So after the match, Christian had to do some damage control. He was saying we won together. This is still us. And the two settled their differences, and then Luchasaurus lifted Christian up in the air, holding the championship. And then we get word that from Tony Schiavone informing Christian in this backstage promo that he'd be defending the title against Darby Allin in a 2 out of 3 falls match. Since Luchasaurus won the title back, I think it was June 17th, Christian was the guy who held the championship and saying that they were champions. It's going to be interesting to see now down the line what they do with this story. Are they going to do the obvious thing in wrestling where Luchasaurus turns on Christian? I really hope not, because for the first time since the Jungle Boy split, we have meaning for Luchasaurus. But the other thing is we're going to have Sting barred from ringside. That's the other stipulation here. So
I love this.
We will see how it goes, and if Darby Allin's able to retain that TNT Championship and Christian's reign is 8 days. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I don't want to see a rift between Christian and Luchasaurus yet. I like the fact that you've got this loyal monster that is just there to do the bidding of this devious, just madman. I think it's interesting. I think the fact that Luchasaurus has been the champion since June 17th, but we've just came accustomed to thinking it's Christian. He holds the belt. He talks like it's his. And now he snuck in and got it. This storyline, I think, is one of the best storylines on AEW over the summer. Christian has slowly been doing the best work of his career.
Agreed.
I think he's absolutely pulled me in, and I think he's absolutely rehabilitated this title. It feels important. It feels special. This we've talked about it, but this dead dad thing with that laying under, fans have attached to. He's going after Nick Wayne's mom all the time now in promos. I said this on the flagship. I think one thing you need to keep an eye out on with this Edge rumor of coming over to the company is how this story progresses to possibly open up an entry into Edge. I'm wondering if putting this TNT title on Christian is actually putting the belt on him is a long-term goal. They have a vision for eventually Edge coming in, feuding with Christian and taking that belt from him. I'm just saying, watch the way they lay the pieces, because if you see them maneuvering some sort of opening for something, that could happen. So I'm 2 out of 3 falls with Darby Allin, absolute psychopath, going against Christian, who is just a in-ring psychologist.
Yep.
This is going to be a great match.
And just to clarify, Sting was barred from ringside for the Collision match. Unclear if he's going to be allowed at ringside and gets involved here. We will see. Knowing it's a pay-per-view, that's a good way to have Sting entryway to get a pop. So I'd imagine he will be somewhere in the fold. But you have the ROH Tag Team Championship on the line. Adam Cole, if he's cleared from injury, and MJF, better than you, baby, defending against the Righteous, Vincent and Dutch. So, man, this is what a rise to the top. This is a huge match for the Righteous. So before we even talk about all this going on, the Righteous, who were circling the independents for a bit, they are involved in the original ROH. The Righteous will look for their first run as Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions, and they won that 4-way on Rampage against the Hardys, the Kingdom, Best Friends, to earn the opportunity. We've seen these two hold ROH gold as recently as, the summer of 2022. They were the 6-man champions for almost over a year.
Oh, yeah.
And this will be the second defense for MJF and Adam Cole since they became ROH Tag Team Champions. But lost in all this, and you mentioned long-term storytelling, the obvious thing seemed like it was going to be Best Friends. It was going to be the Kingdom. It seemed like it was set for that. And I think that's what they're building towards, that maybe the Kingdom are the team that takes these ROH tag team titles, but they're not giving it to us yet. So they are stretching the story out.
That's what I like about it. Cause as soon as they made that 4-way tag match on Rampage, we all were like, oh, the Kingdom. Cause they are directly in the circle of this storyline. But the fact that they didn't pull the trigger excites me because, dude, the Kingdom and Roddy Strong right now is one of your hottest acts. You don't want to pull the trigger too quick. You want to draw it out, because week to week, who is not popping at Roddy Strong hitting that button in the hospital bed? Come on, man. It's gold. So I think they saw that, and I like that they put Vincent and Dutch before Tony took over ROH. For the people that weren't watching, the Righteous were a legit threat in that company. Like, they had belts, they were booked big. So seeing and there were rumors, people forget there were rumors when Bray came back, RIP, with the Wyatt 6.
Yeah, Vincent was gonna be there.
Vincent and Dutch were backstage, and there was rumors that they were going to be involved in that angle. And because when Tony took over ROH, they weren't talent that was brought over. I think they did a couple spots here and there, but here recently they've got more involved. We've seen them become way more involved. They had the storyline with Dark Order on Ring of Honor TV.
Yep.
With Stu Grayson joining them, and so I'm excited because this means there's something. This is all roads lead to the Kingdom. So I'm really intrigued to see what little story wrinkle we get in this match. They're obviously not winning those tag titles, but I think it's going to be a good match.
And it's good for the unassuming tag teams. We saw the Workhorsemen get a title shot against FTR in an awesome match on Collision. Now the Righteous getting a pay-per-view match against two of the hottest acts in all wrestling, bar none. I like the vignette that the Righteous got, the Charles Manson vibes from Vincent, and obviously Dutch wearing all white, creepy stuff going on. And it reminded me of, really the Impact cinematic stuff. And, shout out to, what they're doing there. I think it was really good. So I think, Jimmy Jacobs definitely has his hand in stuff over there, but I'm looking forward to this match. I do have, like I said before, I wish the world title was being defended in some capacity. There's a way to advance the story and have MJF defend the title. But, on the same hand, silver lining is you're making the title defenses feel more important. He just defended against Samoa Joe in a big match on free TV.
If you hold both of those belts, you have to alternate to make,
I understand that. So, and you have a world title match here, and really we'll get to the main event. There's a match that is certainly going to be the main event, and you don't really need to put a world title match in there and stagger them. There's some top of the card stuff that feel really big.
Yeah. And you don't want them to just be holding these ROH tag titles as just
props.
Yeah. Like I want to see that they're active and they're defending.
So we also have a 4-way tag match announced last night. The Young Bucks versus the Gun Club versus Orange and Hook versus the Lucha Brothers. And the stipulation is the winner gets an AEW tag team title match at any time. So this is cool to get these teams on the card. I mean, the Gun Club has been crushing it with Bullet Club Gold. We've been pushing Orange Cassidy and Hook in these backstage vignettes. Obviously, Lucha Brothers. The plan wasn't for Rey Fenix to be the international champion, but maybe they, obviously they have to do something with that eventually down the line. But this 4-way match here has the potential to be a very, very good match. It's a party style match that needs every pay-per-view needs, and this has a potential to steal the card, believe it or not.
Yeah, and this is a match that honestly I can't pick a winner. I think every team in this I could see FTR having next. Like I could see something with any of these teams. So I'll be very now you have the Bucks holding the 6-man's titles with Hangman. So it's like, do you go with that? And like you said, you got Phoenix holding the international. Do you go with that? Gun Club has history with FTR. That's a possibility. Or do you do like a fan service Orange Cassidy and Hook now going for the tag titles? I think anyone could win. So it's interesting.
Speaking of the tag team championship, FTR is going to be defended against Aussie Open. There's a little buzz to this match. We saw the face off last night. Aussie Open was on commentary. They were really, hyping this up, and FTR had a great match with the Workhorsemen. If you have not seen it, please go out and check it out, because what they're able to do as far as match quality, like tag team wrestling personified, and the Workhorsemen are up and coming. I hope they get signed to a full-time contract with AEW, because we need more well-rounded tag teams, and I think the Workhorsemen fit the bill. And FTR, they showed why they are the best tag team in the world right now, just with pretty much no build. Like, that match just felt important, and it was awesome.
Yeah, that hell of a match. FTR continues to stake their claim as the best in the business. I don't think there's a close second, to be honest. To be honest, as far as like, if you just go match to match quality, no one holds a candle to these dudes. Anyone they're in the ring with, they make look like $1 million. It reminds me of the way people used to talk about Flair could make a match work with a broomstick. That's what FTR is to the tag division. I think they're incredible. And dude, this match with Aussie Open, if you remember, they had that match on the Indies during their crazy 2022 run. This match is going to be a barn burner.
Yep. We also have Hangman Page taking on Swerve Strickland in this grudge match. A lot of steam on this one. I got to say, man, Swerve has to win this match. He has to.
He has to. I think long term, if I got the pencil, I know fantasy booking, blah blah blah, whatever. By the end of 2024, I want to see Swerve with that world title.
100%.
I mean, that's the type of charisma this guy has. Like, something about Swerve has pulled me in. I think he's a main event guy. He should be mixing up with Kenny Omega. He should be mixing it up with Bryan Danielson. I want to see him elevated in the mix. And I think taking on Hangman is a step in that direction. Former world champion. This could be a big, big step for Swerve. So I hope they pull the trigger and let him go over. Even if it's in a shitty heel cheating way, I want to see him get the victory.
And there's momentum that you can't create it's organic right now with the Prince Nana dance, the theme song. There's some weight behind it out there. So now's the time to pull the trigger. And you mentioned
who's not doing that Nana dance?
Exactly.
Come on, man.
Swerve when I drive. But like Swerve Strickland is, to me, like you said, I think he's a world champion personified. He has the opportunity to be a absolute megastar. Find a way to get him at the top of the card come late winter, early spring. I want him to be. He's a world champion, and he's a missed opportunity for WWE. We just talked about Hit Row being split up. Since he's been gone, it has not been the same. So there's a reason that Swerve Strickland is catching fire, and he's getting the momentum. He's no longer in tag team stuff and mixed tag stuff. This is just the Swerve show, and he's very over. And I think him beating Hangman, whether it be in a treacherous heel way or whether it be clean, the ending is the same. He goes up the card following this.
Yeah, well, I want him to get that win by any means necessary.
And we have our main event here, Bryan Danielson versus Zack Sabre Jr., which is this was supposed to happen at Forbidden Door. Didn't happen. This is a dream match by all told. And, two of the best technical wrestlers in the history of wrestling, not just current day. This has the big match feel. And we talked about Bryan Danielson wanting to put the end of his career in in view. We're not saying it's happening very soon. This could be his last year in wrestling and then have little piecemeal matches here and there. It's time to maximize Bryan Danielson's bump card and have these meaningful matches. We saw on pay-per-view, obviously wrestled Okada, and now we're here with Zack Sabre Jr., and then we had that awesome match of Ricky Starks. Every time Bryan Danielson enters through that curtain for a pay-per-view, it should mean something. No title needed for this.
No.
It's going to be an absolute epic match, and I think Seattle's going to be on fire because don't forget, Bryan Danielson's hometown.
Yeah, it's going to be on fire for him. And this match, two of the best that do it the way they do it, doing it together. It's going to be incredible. Like, you got two of the best technical wrestlers on the planet coming together. We're going to get something special here. Zack Sabre Jr., sneaky good promo too, man. Like, I know we're not going to get a promo in this match, but like the lead up, the shit talk of Zack Sabre Jr. is some of my favorite because he's such a pompous Brit. I love it. Danielson's been on fire. Like you said, man, his promos lately are like next level. Even just the kickoff promo to Collision last night.
Yeah.
Where there's an intensity there. This man knows that the end is close, you know, like as far as like being a full-time wrestler, he can see it and he's pouring everything he has into this final stretch. And man, we're witnessing a legend bringing it every time he steps through those ropes. So this is going to be an absolute classic.
When Danielson pops that hair in a braid, you know it's next level. So
yeah.
So going to be amazing. I can't wait for Sunday. Obviously, I'm going to be ordering it, going to get some food, hanging out, and you know, it's another opportunity to get together with people and enjoy some pro wrestling. But let's get to big story number 3.
Big story 3.
All right, so we had a significant shakeup of pro wrestling TV here. WWE SmackDown is going to be leaving Fox and going to USA Network beginning in October 2024. So the other story that came from this, of course, SmackDown will debut in USA in October 2024. We're going to have NBC specials in 4 primetime specials per year airing in prime time on the broadcast network of NBC, not on Peacock, going to be on the TV. We don't know if it's going to be Saturday night's main event, but you could probably use the lineage and say it's probably going to be in with Shot Nostalgia usually does. We work things into fruition again. So you guys can But we know that Fox has been the home since 2019. And this has been kind of a conversation we've been having throughout. And NBC Universal owns USA and NBC. They've been in business with WWE for a long period of time. And, you know, Monday Night Raw is coming up as well. And that's part of the conversation that bridges from this. Fox was getting cold feet, Chad. For a bit, we saw that they were not as hot and heavy on the programming. I know they probably would have liked to keep them, but you know, the new TV deal for SmackDown with USA is going to be 5 years, so it's going to be a long time before we're going to have this conversation again.
Yeah, and it cracks me up because all the people that says Dave Meltzer doesn't know what he's talking about. He's been saying that Fox didn't want to be in the WWE business anymore for a while now. He called it. I mean, I don't know, man. I think the price tag was a little hefty. WWE's got new ownership in. Nick Khan seems like a shark. Ari is definitely a shark. They're wanting as much money as possible, and rightfully so. That, you know, who else is drawing numbers like they are on a Friday night? But little too pricey for Fox. Good move. I mean, you're going to a place that has shown the respect to WWE for decades. It's going to be odd if Raw leaves and we have SmackDown now on USA. It's going to be a little different, but the fact they're bringing 4 big shows to NBC Network, that's monstrous. I mean, Saturday night's main event all over again. And with the current state of WWE and the way they're just crushing it, I think it's going to be huge for them to have those big tentpole events quarterly on NBC. I think if the company couldn't grow anymore, that's going to help them for sure.
So we're to assume that since they bought the SmackDown rights that Raw is going to be leaving, or is it a possibility that Raw could also be on USA as well? They'll have NXT Raw and SmackDown, or is it just going to be we're not going to get Raw and NXT on USA anymore. Is that what we're assuming?
I mean, what I read was, I guess anything's possible, but you have to wonder if they're shelling out, what was it? What was the deal? I can't remember the number, but there was whatever they shelled out to bring SmackDown over. I guess if they're willing to double up and shell out more money to keep these other shows, but everything I've been reading has been said, Raw and NXT are kind of, once September hits, they're going to be open market to go somewhere else. You know,
Right.
that deal's up. And I think that's the most interesting thing of this report. I'm not too shocked by SmackDown going back to USA. USA always feels like the safe landing spot for WWE, obviously, but I'm more interested in the future of Raw. Not even in NXT's just kind of like, okay, we'll add that too. But with Raw, I mean, this is your OG flagship show, and it really intrigues me at the possibility of that show going onto a streaming platform, because if, say, Amazon locks them in, man, talk about throwing a wrench into a ton of fans' routine. You know, like, we know Monday nights, USA, and the young generation, I don't think it's going to be a big deal. You know, you just pull up your app. But that like 50 plus crowd that has grew up just knowing WWE, USA Network, Monday Night Raw, Monday nights, to ask them to get an app, download, how's that going to go? I think you might lose a little bit of that crowd, but it's the smart move. I think it's a business move. I think it's like, we're not worried. You could draw away. That could cause people to cut cords, maybe, but then you back down there too. I don't know, man. It's interesting to see if Raw goes streaming, how that affects the numbers, how that affects the streams, how that affects even AEW. Like, does that force them to possibly go streaming? WWE is a trendsetter. They did the network prior to anyone really jumping on that. So maybe they're seeing like, let's test some of this live sporting that these apps are getting into. We see Amazon's doing Thursday Night Football with the NFL now. We see Max just announced they're doing live sports. There's a lot of that push. And we talked about it last week, Ace, about how, or maybe it was the week before that, live sports is really the savior of cable TV right now, as far as like being plugged into that cable package. Like, once live sports starts losing the rights to the NBA, NFL, WWE, AEW, like the big, once they lose that to streaming, cable as we know it could go away.
Yeah, you mentioned being a trendsetter, and I think, you know, the Hollywood Reporter was reporting that the market right now is extremely active, understanding there's a vacancy, because if USA, as you mentioned before, it's possible that they pony up the money and will pay for both. But now it seems likely that someone could get Raw, which was the top scripted program on cable this past TV season. So it's a hot commodity.
Yep.
And you mentioned these non-traditional linear networks that could be in play, like streaming services and quote unexpected players. It could be someone we're not even talking about. We mentioned in the past Netflix, Amazon, Apple TV, but maybe it's another streaming network that's not in existence right now that wants to establish itself with a pre-conditioned crowd that's going to just come right over and subscribe. And we knew NBC, when they did the Peacock thing, they lost a lot of money. And I believe they're still losing a lot of money, but it is a investment in your future to jumpstart an application of streaming that takes time to grow. And you're like jumping ahead different steps when you have this established program that's going to be sought out from fans that are an audience that you mentioned the 50 plus or may have a hard time doing it, but they're going to have, you know, we see the amount of people that watch SmackDown and Raw on any given night. And we mentioned before, you know, the ratings may not as much matter, but you're almost guaranteed to have, you know, close to 1 million people watching your show. And that is something that is invaluable, especially in this new market that we see traditional cable trying to hang on for dear life. And you're also looking at the other players saying, this is a way we can establish ourselves for 4 to 5 years and be a powerhouse built on live program that's consistent. So this is going to be a precedent setting moment. that WWE has control over. And this is fascinating to me.
It's very fascinating, and a thing that wrestling fans aren't considering because they're not really tapped into what's going on right now with the writers' strike. Like, I have several friends affected by this that work within the industry. Hawk works within the industry.
Right.
I have a good writer friend tied into the SAG strike and the the WGA strike. The word is that the writer's strike is about to end. Like, they're in close negotiations about to end it. But with these streaming, a lot of the disgruntled nature of it is centered around streaming services and the money being relegated to the writers from these streaming platforms because they get to keep their numbers secret. There is something to be said that these streaming platforms are going to be cutting costs by not putting as much scripted television, to say they're going to agree to certain terms, but by doing that, they're going to cut back on the amount of stuff, original scripted programming. They're going to cut back on it because they have to make these concessions to the writers. Okay, we'll pay you more, but now we're not going to do as many shows. So with that, with their programming kind of getting pulled back a little bit, they're looking for other ways to bring people in than just original scripted programming. So with that, I think that is why you're seeing a lot of these streaming platforms looking for other ways to bring in money through live sports. I think it's a way to, it's all kind of tied in together. Obviously, you take the live sports from cable, you're gaining all those people from cable that are going to come to your platform, but also you're saving money by not having to pay these writers and put out as many shows as you were. Now we can kind of redirect our focus and bring in WWE. So I think, I really think the streaming deals, man, I think Netflix, Apple, Amazon have shit tons of money to be a player. Apple is putting out the new Martin Scorsese movie, Leonardo DiCaprio movie. They are putting billions of dollars into this. So for them to snake WWE away from basic cable, that's a windfall for them. So that writer's strike and the way they're kind of going to pull back on the scripted programming really opens up an avenue for them to eyeball, hey, WWE's over here. That could fill a lot of programming for us. Let's bring them in. So it's something to watch.
Oh, absolutely. And this may jumpstart the thing that's in motion. It's inevitable at this point that traditional cable is going wayward elsewhere. But I think this could expedite it in a big way where it could set the tone. We see WWE, we keep saying they're trendsetters. They set the market. They move in a direction where other people follow suit because usually what they do is pretty successful. We watch the streaming services. You mentioned WWE Network back in 2014. That was no guarantee. When they decided to move away from traditional pay-per-view, it was almost laughed at by it was such a risk. So this could be setting the market for what the next 10 years of live programming looks like. And as always, WWE at the forefront of things.
Yeah, man. It's funny because for so many years, pro wrestling has just looked like good old boys with some fake stuff. And they got it going up in the noggin, man. They're smarter than you think. And they've Vince, say what you want about the guy, genius. When it comes to business, he has done a lot of things that in the hands of Jim Crockett, would we be where we are today with all these $billion deals? Got to give the guy some credit.
It's a different mindset. It's playing chess while everybody else is playing checkers. But let's get to quick hitters.
Big story. Quick hitters.
All right, got a lot of good quick hitters here to go through. We're going to start with Dave Meltzer giving an update on Jade Cargill's expected arrival to WWE. He was talking about this on Wrestling Observer Radio. And right now he said that WWE is working on the creative and saying that it's going to be main roster and that's of high priority creative. So The quote was interesting, Chad, and I'll let you take the lead on this in a sec because you were definitely gung-ho in her being involved in main story programming based on her star power coming in. But Meltzer said, she was in Orlando today, right? I asked if she was at the Performance Center. People had not seen her. That doesn't mean she wasn't there. I was told that doesn't mean she wasn't there. We didn't see her. They're doing main roster creative for her right now. What would I call it? It's high priority. They're not bringing her in like, how they bring in some NXT people like Von Wagner, Albert Fire. Albert Fire is actually a good one, or Katana Chance. People that are brought up, but they have no idea what to do with them, and they just kind of disappear into the dust. It's almost like, why do we even bother calling them up? She's not earmarked to be like that. She's earmarked for, quote, real stuff. So this kind of gives us the answer we were talking about. Who knows if there's a lot of truth to it. They look at her as not as much as a prospect project as a star that they're inheriting that they want to emphasize.
Yeah, I think we could see her as early as Survivor Series if they wanted to just pull the trigger on and get her on our TV, but they could also hold off and have her debut at the Rumble. I mean, that's a big way. Have her win the Rumble. That would be huge. That's a big kind of lure you away from AEW type of statement. We're going to have you win the Rumble and go to Mania and be in a title match, but we did see that WWE trademarked the name Jada Parker. So maybe Jade is turning into Jada. I'm kind of bummed we're not getting Jade. I mean, they're going to put their little brand on it. And another thing they trademarked, and I'm wondering if this is tied into the Jade Cargill package in WWE. They trademarked the phrase "out the mud." Are they? I would think she would. Are they referring to AEW as the mud, mud show, and her out the mud? Is this good? I don't know. I just saw that they trademarked out the mud, and I'm like, what's that tied to?
I mean, they named a pay-per-view Great Balls of Fire at one point. Maybe they're having a premium live event called Out the Mud.
It's such a weird phrase, but yeah, I'm excited to see how they debut her. I like that it's going to be main roster. I know she could have easily went to NXT and beat Becky Lynch, and that would have been huge in its own right. But when you got somebody like this, I think there's precedent set with the way they brought in Cody from AEW. If they bring in Jade in a similar way they brought in Cody, man, that's just bait for people in AEW. Like, man, when they bring us over, look what they do with us.
True.
It's ways to negotiate with AEW talent in the future for WWE.
So we saw this weekend, we had the event DDT's Who's Gonna Top, and Chris Jericho carried over his grudge with Don Callis to Takeshita here. So Chris Jericho made his first appearance on DDT programming via video message sent to Takeshita at the event. Takeshita defeated Mao. He introduced the audience to Don Callis, everyone booing him. And then Jericho appeared on the screen, ripping a picture of Takeshita in half. And now it seems like we're going to be having this match happening at DDT, the event called Ultimate Party 2023 on November 12th. And it's going to be Jericho versus Takeshita here in DDT. So DDT's in the eye of the storm right now as far as good publicity, because we got this here. We're going to talk about this event, this match that they did that was unique. If you guys didn't see it going viral, but your thoughts on Jericho wrestling Takeshita, not in AEW, but in DDT?
I love it, man. DDT was the place where Takeshita made his name and kind of got his start. And I love that Jericho is still hungry. He still, he showed up at Rev Pro before All In to shoot
True.
an angle with Will Ospreay. It just shows, having Jericho pop up on a DDT show, that's huge for DDT. People can hate on Jericho for whatever, but the guy holds weight. He's a current legend working in the industry, and him going to the Rev Pros, and I know DDT's a little bigger than Rev Pro, but still, yeah, I think it's great for the company. And I love that they're shooting these angles of these stories in situations like this. It brings those fans into AEW. I love it.
So moving over to New Japan Pro Wrestling, we had the event Destruction and Kobe happen and finish right before recording here early Sunday morning. And we had the card was okay, not as much storyline advance, but the two matches that held the most weight was Naito was defending his title shot at Wrestle Kingdom against Jeff Cobb. He successfully retained. And we also had the IWGP United States Championship on the line. Will Ospreay defeated 2G. After the match, Zack Sabre Jr. staked his claim that he wants a match with Will Ospreay at Royal Quest 3. Ospreay accepted, and Ospreay tried for a hidden blade after shaking hands, but ZSJ avoided the attack, and then we get this build to this match at Royal Quest. It was a full event. There was, obviously Sonata's the world champion, didn't defend. I guess that's in vogue right now, not defending your world title. Evil stole the championship. The top of the card seems like it's lackluster. This is what I mean. They're in a rebuilding phase, and like we talked about this with the G1. I love what Naito's done, but you need to build new stars there.
Yeah, I mean, we've been beating that drum for a while now since the coverage of G1, where, a lot of your guys at the top, Naito, Tanahashi, they're slowing down. I'm not trying to take anything away from them, but they're not what they were at the height of New Japan. You really, I just think the G1, Naito winning the G1 was just a big misstep, in my opinion.
Yeah. We also had Adam Cole making an appearance at Deadlock Pro, and this is a North Carolina independent. So Chris Danger was cutting a promo during the DPW event on Saturday when the screen blacked out. Adam Cole appeared. He informed Chris Danger that he had some unfortunate news, and he accepted Danger's challenge. And by the way, this match will also take place on November 12th in North Carolina. And Cole said since Danger wants his first pro wrestling match against Adam Cole, he's being thrown right into the fire, and we'll find out if he can handle being burned. So we have this event. I mean, DPW is an awesome independent. If you guys check them out, the bigger story here is obviously this is pre-taped. He wasn't involved in a physical angle, but Cole did jump off that stage platform at Grand Slam, and we don't have an update on the visit to the hospital after landing awkwardly on the ankle. If he's severely injured, how long he'll be out of action. This is at least promising that by November 12th, he feels like he's at least going to be good enough to go.
Yeah, I feel like he's just jammed up, or like I said, I feel like if it was serious, we would have already heard something. What's the story? Do you know the story here, Ace, as far as like Chris Danger, Adam Cole coming here? What's the connection that would make it? Is he friends with the promotion? Is he kind of tied in with Chris Danger in some way? Like, is this random to me?
It is. I believe it's random. For lack of a build, I think it's someone obviously willing to take independent dates, an independent willing to pay a big star to come in. So, I mean, I can also look up there is history between them, but from what I understand, it's just they want to set the stage for this match happening at this event November 12th.
That's a out of the blue, good for Deadlock Pro. But, when I see something like this, it seems like, he's friends with the promoter, or there's some sort of like connection there. But yeah, that's awesome. Adam Cole's coming to Deadlock Pro, because we never see him do indies, like he hasn't done any indies since he left WWE, I believe.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll do more research and we'll come back to you guys next week if there's any more history, but it feels like it's just Chris Danger challenged him and Adam Cole answered the challenge. And this is like simple, one-on-one getting people in the building. Yeah.
It just shows you, hey, all you independents out there, shoot your shot. Like,
true.
Shoot your shot. You might get somebody.
We also, speaking of independents, Eddie Kingston made it clear he's going to be changing his work schedule, much to the chagrin of a lot of different independents that had him booked in advance. He said that he's going to be not working independent dates for the foreseeable future and focus on his work in ROH, AEW, and then obviously New Japan Pro Wrestling. We saw Defy quote tweet what Eddie Kingston did with, it wasn't like disparaging towards Eddie Kingston, but it wasn't complimentary that they all found out last minute with this, and they were hyping a show around him, which affects ticket sales. And Eddie Kingston's got to focus on himself. Obviously, he's dealing with the lower back injury. He has a lot of miles on the body. This is his big shot. He's a world champion, so he's got to focus on first and foremost keeping himself healthy in the ring. So, easing up on these independent dates, similar to Will Ospreay said he's going to do it. It makes sense to me, so I don't blame him for doing that.
I don't blame. I mean, yeah, things are going to happen. Last minute cancellations. That's just the nature of the business. I get the independent being sour. They sold tickets on a thing. You're not going to be able to deliver. I get that, but I really liked what Kingston said. It seemed like I love the independents. It's breaking my heart to have to do this, but the fact that he's focused on what at the position he's being put in with these two titles, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And we also had news dropping here that PCO made it clear he's going to be departing Impact Wrestling soon. So Pat LaPrade reporting on Saturday that PCO, who's 55 years old, gave his notice to Impact and his contract was set to expire near the end of October. So we're going to see the end of PCO maybe in an active capacity, or maybe he just wants to kind of expand the independence. We know that he's had resurgence of his career. 55 is not 55 where it was a couple years ago. PCO still, he's a little bit worn down. He's been in action. I mean, believe it or not, this dude is a former WWF tag team champion with the Quebecers in the early 90s. So he's been all around. I mean, he was ROH world champion about 5-6 years ago. He's been involved in Impact programming for a little bit now. I mean, he's been there. This has been his home. And he's been ridden off pretty much TV after this feud with Bully Ray, and he was involved in the Feast or Fire thing, but it seems like he's going away from Impact. That's not to say he won't be back in some capacity, but for now, the contract is going to be expiring.
I mean, 55 PCO, the amount of work he's done, the amount of punishment he's put his body through. If he wants to take a little hiatus, I wouldn't blame the guy.
So we also have John Cena announcing that he's going to have a tag match at Fastlane, doesn't have a partner. So at the end of Friday SmackDown, John Cena had signed the contract pitting himself against Solo Sikoa and Jimmy Uso. AJ Styles was supposed to be the person teaming with Cena. However, Solo and Uso attacked Styles backstage, and they put him in an ambulance. I think there's a shoot injury for AJ, so they wrote him off TV. So to me, and I know the news was paired with this, was LA Knight wasn't on our screen because he tested positive for COVID, so he wasn't there. It seems to me it's going to be John Cena, LA Knight versus Solo and Jimmy Uso, right? That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. And man, AJ, dude, like it's breaking my heart. This guy's in the twilight of his career as far as like prime time. He can still deliver. The way he's been used in the last like 3 years for me over there, like that's one of the guys they are dropping the ball on. I know a lot of it's injury and that happens, but even outside when he's healthy and he's there, I just feel like they're missing the boat on him. Like he should be mixing up with Seth Rollins and the top of the card guys. I think AJ, he's a top guy, and I hate that this is where he's at, at this stage in his career.
Agreed, yeah. We had some news here that Hulk Hogan became a 3-time married man, so you can try it again for a 3rd time. The 7-year-old Hulk Hogan, shoot named Terry Bollea, and his new wife Sky Daly got married during a ceremony in Florida. So this was reported on Daily Mail, also confirmed by TMZ. They've been dating since 2022. They got engaged this July, so we're not going to sit here and break down all the TMZ news, but congrats on the nuptials with Hulk Hogan. Hopefully it works out better than the first 2 times.
Yeah, 25-year age difference. Good for you, Hogan. Good for you, Hulkster.
Brother. We have Jon Moxley, an update with his injury that had forced him to vacate the International Championship in a split decision here against Rey Fenix at Grand Slam. So watching this match live in the building, I know they didn't show a lot of this on TV, but it seemed like he was dazed from that initial flip off the stage, that dreaded, haunted part of the stage where Adam Cole got hurt.
Yeah.
It looked like the tailbone of Rey Fenix hit Jon Moxley in the head. And I don't think it was the pile driver. It felt like the pile driver was probably safer than people probably thought. Scary moment though, because he was sitting down in the ring for quite some time and referee Rick Knox had no idea what to do. And Moxley was, quote, rocked by the spot, but he was able to walk off on his own and he didn't go to the hospital. So he did call an audible himself, putting the title on Rey Fenix. And, I don't know, maybe you could speak to this as well, but I think watching this through a lens of a fan, the referee needs to just count through. If the guy doesn't kick out, he doesn't kick out. Isn't it on them to kick out?
Yeah, you got to go. You have to treat the pin like a shoot, man. You just have to go. And if it's on the talent, and if it ends, it ends. Like that's on the talent to kick out. The ref, when he did that, I was like, what are you doing? You hear Moxley yell, fuck you. Like he was pissed because he wanted him to do that. I mean, Sneed called it. Sneed, as soon as that spot happened, Sneed was like, Mox looks rocked because they couldn't get their bearings about them. But the fact that he put the match that he put on, it was pretty good for a guy just off his rocker, I know Meltzer said that the people had spoke to him, or the people they had spoke to said the pile drivers were actually nothing to do with what happened. Like everything had happened prior to that. The pile driver was Moxley asking Phoenix, hey man, let's get out of here. I'm hurt,
Yep. So we got an update on WWE's Elimination Chamber pay-per-view from Australia and the time slot here, because everyone's wondering about what time it's going to be starting. And this is going to be airing from Optus Stadium on Saturday, February 24th from Australia. Meltzer confirmed it will be a very early morning show, likely starting about 6 a.m. Eastern, 3 a.m. Pacific on Saturday morning. So the early time slot may hurt them a little bit, but I don't think they're really focused on so much the live views, but consumption of all the views, and people can watch on demand. Just for consistency, this is the first time WWE's been back in Australia since 2019. In 2018, they had WWE's Super Showdown pay-per-view from Melbourne, and the event also had an early start time for those in the US. And this is a Elimination Chamber event that's being held because the deal between the Western Australian government and WWE making a deal to have the event in Perth. So this is bringing some international dates for a show that is involved in WWE canon. That's a big difference than the Super Showdown pay-per-view. That's a one-off, similar to the show we saw in India a couple weeks ago. This is a show that fits. It's on the road to WrestleMania. This is a big event.
Yeah, hopefully they give Grayson Waller a nice little spot here. He's an
True.
Aussie, right? I'd like to see that.
So we also had a unique DDT match got international mainstream. I was mentioning this before, but there was a match on September 18th with Minoru Suzuki and Sanshiro Takagi inside what's a bullet train. They call it a Shinkansen. This was covered by everybody from ABC News, NBC Now, NBC Nightly Newscasts in many major markets internationally throughout Europe by the BBC. And then apparently, this is the metrics they have, given all the different coverage in the US, the abbreviated 1 minute to 90-second clip of the match likely had more TV viewership than any match in the US this year, and certainly more non-wrestling fans saw it than any other match as far as TV goes. So obviously people are covering it as this like one-off sort of sensational story about these guys wrestling legit in the cabin of a bullet train. There were 75 people on board with them at 25,000 yen, which is equivalent to $169, which sold out instantly. It was the first match in history that was on a bullet train, and the train went from Tokyo to Nagoya. Match went 29 minutes.
Crazy.
37 minutes and 29 seconds, I should say. And it obviously they had to work in the small aisles. They had to do a lot of comedies, submissions, and figure out, all that other stuff. But the biggest pop was there was a guy came out in full outfit to punch tickets and wound up being Kenta Kobashi, and he got a huge pop on there. People enjoyed it. So this was unique. DDT got some eyes on their product, but it speaks to where wrestling is. I posted a thing about Meltzer talking about how, not everybody knows who wrestling. We live in this bubble. This is the type of stuff that rises to the surface.
Yeah, this is great. This is this is just classic freak show stuff, man. Like Pride putting on these crazy matches back in the day. I love when something wild like this gets out there.
So we also had a story about Panini filed a lawsuit against WWE for terminating its contract. In the filing, Panini says the contract was terminated in late August with, quote, no warning whatsoever. The update on the story was, obviously the lawsuit, but WWE says the trading card company Panini has violated the terms of their agreement. And we know Panini was the exclusive trading card and collectible sticker partner since 2021. And WWE wanted to get, involved with Fanatics. So this is sort of a lot of stuff involved here where maybe there's some collusion, figuring out a way to get out of a deal. You have lawyers involved, and now Panini's left out in the lurch. I think they lost UFC. Obviously, UFC. Actually, no, they still own UFC. They lost NFL recently. So Panini is a card collecting powerhouse. This is a big hit for them.
Yeah, that's massive, man. Seems like some backstage political corporate succession devious business tactics going down between these two. That's a big loss, but I'm sure WWE is gonna be just fine.
So our final story here in Quick Hitters, you have Jacob Fatu crediting MJF for helping him find his voice in Major League Wrestling. He said, quote, MJF was in the back, and it's when I was cutting a promo for La Parka before we wrestled at Super Fight Night, and just really talks about just MJF giving him advice. And this gives the perspective of how helpful MJF and how much he gives back to the business, even at a young age, figuring out who people are. And I think he's an asset in so many ways, but this is something that people don't talk about because he's giving back. And this gives perspective of what he's probably doing in the AEW locker room, understated.
Yeah. He said, just talk how you talk, keep the energy, be you. And Jacob talks really highly of him, says, but I know when I was there, Just to touch base on AEW, MJF, I know when I checked in with him, he was always on my side. It wasn't a character with him. It was pure love. I can tell when the love is there, to tap in with MJF was off the hook. But yeah, that's one of my stories about when he came in during a promo, which is, I didn't like to speak, especially when he came in and he talks about how MJF is a straight shooter. He would tell you like, hey, your promos suck. And he had a lot of respect to him. He said he's always been good to me. So shout out to Oos.
That's awesome, man. But let's get to Dave's Raves to talk about what he thought about the week in wrestling.
Dave Raves.
All right, with the busy nature of wrestling, make sure you guys check out the Dave Meltzer newsletter from this week. He gave full tribute to Terry Funk. It's well worth the read. It's about 6 pages long. It's fantastic. He gave his match of the week. It was Samurai del Sol teaming up with Mascara Dorado versus Titan and Sobrano Jr. September 16th, Mexico City for CMLL's 90th anniversary show at Arena Mexico. Match got 4 3/4 stars. He talked about the amazing nature of the whole event. And his performer of the week was Voltor Jr., who competed in a hair versus hair mask match where he defeated Angel de Oro. And this was the world's oldest wrestling promotion, 90th anniversary, a sellout of 15,000 fans at Arena Mexico. And the one thing he said in here, and I'll let you guys read it throughout it, but he said on nights like that, Arena Mexico is a unique combination of the best of different eras and worlds. The building atmosphere is reminiscent of a major territorial heyday in the 70s, a sellout crowd that is at its biggest show of the year, whether it be San Martino against the year's hottest challengers, Dusty Rhodes going for the NWA title in Florida or Georgia, Thanksgiving in Greensboro, the AWA cage match with the Crusher or Battle Royals in San Francisco and LA. But in the ring, you have the best of 2023, whether it be the creative moves combined with the drama of a big hair versus a mask match. So he was very complimentary of the show, wasn't able to get out to Arena Mexico. I know this is, to me, a bucket list thing for myself. I look at the Tokyo Dome, I look at Arena Mexico as whether you're a big fan of CMLL or Lucha Wrestling, I feel like this is a bucket list thing for people to check out. And a big show like this provides an atmosphere that is like back in the day. We remember we talked about the Don Callis story being attacked and stuff. Wrestling there is such a, it's light years behind as far as what kayfabe is. They keep it very much in a bubble and protect it.
I love it. I love that it harkens back to the old territory days. And I got to be honest, man, I would love to see WWE or AEW do a show down there at one of their big arenas. Like, it would be incredible.
So he also said the one thing I noticed is that with the increase in AEW TV, it seems that fans have less time to watch shows from companies other than AEW and WWE. Our response to this show, which was a bigger show than last year with a far hotter promotion, was only half of what it was a year ago. We've seen similar declines in AAA and New Japan big shows. It's understandable. If you're trying to keep up with storylines spreading over so many shows, there is less and less time to sample big shows from other companies. But for those who did watch, the reaction was extremely favorable. So paired with that part of the newsletter and also the Funk tribute, talking about Funk passing away and his whole career and lineage, honestly, Dave Meltzer's best attribute for these newsletters is these eulogies. He does such a great job. They should be put in a book. They're fantastic.
Yeah, and he really, I love Dave because he keeps you, he holds such respect and reverence for Lucha Libre and Japanese wrestling that he keeps you in the know of that. And I think that's an important thing that Dave does on his weekly show. And the tributes are incredible. I can't wait to read the Terry Funk tribute.
Yeah, and I'll leave you one thing he said here. Funk was someone who would be great in every time and place, largely because he wasn't stuck in any way and would figure it out. So different eras of wrestling create different stars of Terry Funk, and he's the guy who transcends different eras.
Funk's the man. Funk forever, baby.
Funk forever, baby. Let's get to the week ahead.
The week ahead.
All right, starting here on Raw tonight, we have the Undisputed WWE Tag Team Championship on the line, the Judgment Day defending against Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. The NXT North American Championship on the line, Dominic Mysterio defending against Dragon Lee. Shinsuke Nakamura responding to Seth Rollins. Bronson Reed versus Otis. Tommaso Ciampa versus Ludwig Kaiser. Miz TV with Drew McIntyre. And Cody Rhodes will kick off the show with a promo. So that's all happening on Raw as we speak.
Is it just me or has Raw been kind of lackluster lately?
It has been, for sure.
Yeah.
We have no matches announced for Fastlane, which is in 2 weeks.
Not a lot of like big meaty stories outside of Judgment Day and Bloodline right now for me.
The focus on a lot of the TV has been NXT, and we have the NXT Global Heritage Invitational Finals, Butch versus Joe Coffey, the strap match between Eddie Thorpe and Dijak, Trick Williams versus Joe Gacy, Gigi Dolan versus Blair Davenport, Bronco Nima and Lucian Price versus Hank Walker and Tank Ledger, Baron Corbin versus Josh Briggs, Carmelo Hayes, Dragunov sign a contract for the No Mercy title match, Thea Hale versus Danny Palmer, and we'll hear from Tiffany Stratton. Good God, what a card stacked up here on Tuesday night.
Super stacked. These names crack me up. Like their NXT name database. It seems like
So
it's being
funny.
generated by the same algorithm.
On AEW Dynamite, we have the contract signing for WrestleDream between Swerve and Hangman. We'll hear from MJF and Adam Cole, and we're going to get Julia Hart versus Willow Nightingale in what I had assumed to be a warm-up match for her DBS Championship against Statlander.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the little things that aren't announced are always fun before big pay-per-view. What are they going to do? What angle are they going to shoot?
So we're also going to get Impact on Thursday, the X Division Championship. Chris Sabin defends against the Ultimate X winner, Alan Angels. Tommy Dreamer and Heath teaming up versus Kenny King and Sheldon Jean. Mike Bailey versus John Gresham. Mike Bailey getting ready for his match Bound for Glory against Will Ospreay, which is going to be awesome. And we're going to say goodbye to Yua, who's probably on his way back to New Japan Pro Wrestling. He just finished off getting that fired briefcase at a Feast and Fired.
I wouldn't be mad at Alan Angels taking home that X Division Championship.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen yet since Sabin just won it, but you never know. Impact does things like this. So we have the NXT No Mercy show happening on 9:30. NXT Championship, Carmelo Hayes defends against Dragunov. NXT Women's Championship, Extreme Rules, Becky Lynch against Tiffany Stratton. North American Championship was supposed to be Dom versus Mustafa Ali, but it's going to be Dom versus a mystery opponent. The NXT Heritage Cup, Noam Dar defends against the winner of the tournament, whether it be Joe Coffey or Butch, and Baron Corbin versus Braun Breaker.
Crazy that they cut Mustafa Ali right in the middle of a storyline. They typically don't do that. They'll write you off somehow, but they didn't.
No, they wasted no time. And then on Collision on Saturday, we have Andrade El Idolo versus Juice Robinson and Best Friends versus The Kingdom.
Nice.
So that is our week ahead. Of course, WrestleDream we previewed. Oh, we also have SmackDown. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. United States Championship on the line. Rey Mysterio against Santos Escobar. So LWO in-house fighting. Charlotte Flair versus Bayley and the Grayson Waller effect featuring Bobby Lashley. Some good stuff, man, this week. Jam-packed.
Good stuff. Always these shows. I mean, there's a little something for everybody. And we didn't even preview NWA, MLW. There's GCW. There's always something going on. Anything before we get out of here, Ace? Anything you want to plug real quick?
Now, make sure you guys check out Shot Nostalgia. Make sure you guys check out Brace for Impact. And make sure you guys are following at Turnbuckle Tavern for all your updates on wrestling news.
Yeah, follow at Turnbuckle Tavern on IG. It'll keep you up to date on all the shows, what we got going on. TheTurnbuckleTavern.com will take you everywhere. The three main hubs that keeps you locked in with everything we've got going on: YouTube, Apple, Spotify. If you give us a follow, a like, tell a friend about us, or leave a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify, it means the world, helps us out, does a bunch of stuff for us. Next week, we'll talk all about WrestleDream. Can't wait to be back with you guys again. Till next Monday, when we wine and dine with you kings and queens, stay out of the alley and away from the pork and beans. God luck and good speed.
Reach for the sky, boy.